Welcome back to the Faculty Factory Podcast. I'm Kim Skorupski here at UTMB, the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas. And like I've been doing lately, I want us to learn more about Galveston, Texas. And I'm going to tell you about this Texas City disaster. In 1947, there was a disaster industrial accident in Texas City. It's a city right up the highway from us here in Galveston. It was the deadliest industrial accident in U.S. history, one of the history's largest non-nuclear explosion. Started a chain reaction of fires and explosions. It killed at least 581 people. And why am I starting up the podcast with this horrible news and history? Because that accident spurred the fact that UTMB is one of the leading centers in burns research. We have the Shriners Children Texas here, and UTMB, we do burns research. So there you go. Well, friends, I'm happy to bring back in this reunion episode one of our guests from 3 years ago, Dr. Rakhee Bhayani. Dr. Bhayani, welcome back to the podcast.
It's great to be back with you, Kim. I can't believe it's been 3 years. It seems like it was just a year ago.
It's crazy how time flies. Friends, Dr. Rakhee Bhayani is a professor of medicine and the vice chair for advancing women's careers in the Division of General Medicine and Geriatrics in the Department of Medicine at Washington University School of Medicine. She's steeped in the Forum for Women in Medicine, Advancing Women in Academic Medicine, and episode number 167, if you're interested, about 3 years ago, she had a great session. She led with us a conversation around fear of failure, negativity bias, purpose, establishing priorities and goals. She asked us to think about, what do you love? What do others say you do well? It was a great episode. So I encourage you to fly back to episode number 167. We're over about 350 now, I think. But Rakhee, again, thank you so much for being back on the podcast. And what would you like to talk about today?
Well, first of all, it's great to be back. As we were trying to sort of think about what we want to talk about today, I want to just sort of have us reflect on what would it feel like if we were in a workplace where we felt like we were seen and known and valued by our colleagues and our leaders, and we were sort of comfortable bringing our whole self to work and able to then do our best work and be the most productive and effective in our roles. And this is sort of the crux and the foundation of what it is when you have a space that really values belonging, sort of that community building and feeling like you belong in that workplace. So that's kind of where I would like to sort of start a conversation.
And why I love this, but why does it matter? I mean, why do we care about belonging? Isn't it just obvious that when people go to work someplace that they clearly belong? They have the badge, don't they? They get the paycheck, they have the uniform or the credentials. So why does it matter?
So that's a great question, right? You would think, because who would say no, that this is not an important thing, that people shouldn't feel valued and seen and known, right, within their workplace. But when we think about it at face value, each of us has so many different facets to us, right? Very different parts of our individuality. And some of them are seen, readily seen of parts of who we are, and some of them are hidden. And if we come to work and we have to specifically hide a part of who we are, that's mental energy and tax that we're taking away from the work that we're doing, right? Because you're constantly thinking about how you have to change, maybe how you dress, how you look, how you speak, any of those things in order to fit in. That just takes away from your day-to-day, because work is difficult as it is, right? Everybody has challenging jobs. Everyone is busy. Everyone has competing priorities. And so what our goal is really to sort of feel comfortable and have that sense of safety to bring our whole self to work so that we can really spend our energy on the work that we're doing, as opposed to sort of that mental tax that comes with kind of having to sort of censor ourselves or censor parts of ourselves in order to feel like if we don't do those things, we're not going to be valued in
Yeah.
that space.
You're making me think of just even in the most simplistic kind of version of this is when you feel like you're in the down in the dumps, or you're anxious or worried, or you're in a bad place in your life, and you have to put on that mask. I'm a sociologist from way back when, so I think it was we all put on different masks. There's the front stage of us, the backstage of us, and we have different roles and different hats we wear, as you mentioned. But when you're in kind of in the down in the dumps and you're, oh, dramaturgical, that was what I was thinking of, the dramaturgical approach. Maybe it was Irving Goffman. I don't know. Anyway, let it go. I got to tell my brain, let it go. But it can be, as you said, really exhausting when you feel inside rattled, sad, anxious, mad, all those emotions, but you have to present as, it's game on, it's showtime, and you have to sparkle and glitz and no, I'm great, never better. How are you? It's such a, as you say, a tax. It's so exhausting. And so that simplistically, if I'm in a mode like that on a one-off, it is like, that is hard. It drains me, saps my energy to play that part when I don't feel it inside. So I can't imagine what that's like if that is the pattern, if that's your MO, your modus operandi every day, where you're having to project a different version of you. I can't even imagine that how utterly emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually exhausting that must be. So you're suggesting that sometimes we have these environments where we create an environment where people don't feel like they belong, or other people choose environments where they don't belong, and we're twisting ourselves into different shapes that it doesn't help us or the institution or the department, the division, or the whole climate, the culture.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's a challenge, right? Because a lot of times when we talk about like recruitment, for example, and we look at candidates, and oftentimes we'll say, wow, is this person going to fit in? And we really want to reframe that, right? Because it's not really about fitting in, it's about the contributions that they can make. Like, what are the contributions they can make to our organization? Because you're not really looking for more of the same, right? I mean, if you think about all of the literature that's out there about the most productive and effective teams, it's that you have individuals who have differing strengths that bring in different sort of perspectives to that team, and they become better as a whole. And so when you think about fitting in, it's sort of like if you walk into a room and you kind of look around and say, okay, well, what do I need to do in order for people to then accept me? Like, how do I need to change in order to be accepted? Versus if you are in an environment where you feel like you have that baseline psychological safety, you can be who you are and aren't afraid to sort of share your perspectives, share if maybe you have a different idea than what has always been done. And even if maybe they don't go with your idea, that's okay. You still feel like, okay, I can still share. And people are going to not only listen, but they're going to say, wow, they're going to ponder it. They're going to think about it because they really do value your contribution and what you bring to the table.
Oh, Dr. Bhayani, I like how you've switched and flipped that idea around of, we have a couple slots to fill, and will they fit in this culture? Is he going to get along with us? Is he going to fit in well with the team? Are they going to jive well and gel well in our team? Versus, are we going to embrace, grow, stretch by having this person? What will they add to us? What are they going to add to this Waldorf salad? What extra spice are they going to bring versus the same old, same old? Yeah. Do we want a bunch of mini me's? Maybe, I guess some people be like, yeah, we want someone exactly like us because, we're in a dance line and we all have to look exactly the same. So yes, that's exactly, we do want someone. And yet in science, um, and in health, we probably want people who can like make us go, huh, Great idea. I had never thought of that. So thank you for raising our awareness of getting out of the mold of saying, okay, are they going to fit versus, this is going to be fun. This is going to be exciting. I want somebody different with a different perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, especially when we're in spaces that we are, in those rooms where we're recruiting, whether it's recruiting for medical students or trainees or faculty, recruiting for leadership roles, right? You really do want to think about that. And then also really be realistic. Like if you are really hoping to bring someone who has maybe, different perspectives, are you going to really be open? And is the environment available to support that candidate as well, right? And so I think that's where that belonging part really matters. It's not just that you are then inviting them for an interview or making them an offer to come to the institution, but also have the infrastructure to say, yes, not only are we giving you this invitation, but we are ready to listen, hear, grow. We have a growth mindset. We want to, we want to change this up, or we just want to learn more. We want to grow this, program, this initiative. We want to create something here. So it really has to be both parts together. It can't just be that, oh, this person has a different perspective and we know that these teams are good and let's bring them in without that other sort of that openness, the
Yeah.
infrastructure there. Otherwise it's not gonna work.
Yeah. It's like having a new gadget or new upgraded iPhone, but then you don't use any of the new technology. Oh, we'd love to have you come on board, but we don't do things like that around here. That's
Right.
not how we do things. We've been doing things this way for centuries and it's fine. By gosh and by golly, we don't need your newfangled ideas. So, Rocky, how do we build or how do we create the sense of belonging? What are some things tidbits you can help people be more aware of how to create belonging?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is really just to even understand what it is. Just to recognize like what does that mean? Um, because I think we go through our day to day, right? And we kind of are, especially if you've been at that institution for a long time or you've been in that team for a long time, oftentimes it just sort of has like a flow, right? You just sort of have this cadence and that you have with your team or with your department, your division, but you really do have to be intentional about this and really think about, what do we want as our team, as our division, as our department, as our institution, and what do we value? What are our goals? What are our missions? And how are we going to achieve those? So at the core of belonging, again, is like that psychological safety to be who you are and learn about each other, right? Because the best way for us to create a connection with each other is to ask questions, to learn a little bit more about the individual, right? To create that connection, to learn things about each other. So, really, the first step is to have a conversation, and to be open. So, not only asking questions, but when the other person is speaking, you're not listening to speak again, but you're listening to actually hear. So, you want to really pause, listen to what they're saying, maybe even like reflect back on some of the things that they've shared with you, and then sort of create that dialogue. So I think the first step is really to creating connections with the teammates. And when you think about it, you don't have to be like the leader in your department. You don't have to be a department chair. You don't have to be a division chair to do this. This could be something that anyone can do within whatever space you're in, whatever your sphere of influence is, right? So it could be even if you're rounding on, with a team on the inpatient service as a faculty member, it could just be with your resident, your intern, and the medical student. And that is still impactful, right? Because you're still impacting the way that individuals are experiencing that rotation at that institution, right? And so again, it's about creating connections.
This is great. Being curious and listening. That curiosity of asking questions, which is just so innate to what we are and why we're in academic health and why we're scientists and educators. We're curious. We love to learn. And you mentioned earlier that growth mindset. So that's great. Being curious and listening. Someone told me to truly listen, you must be silent. And it's one of those word things that if you look at the words listen and silent, they're the exact same letters, just jumbled up. So that's another reminder for me to close my mouth and listen. So that listen, being silent and listening and being curious builds that connection. And then I also really appreciate how you pointed out that you don't have to be, it's not a high level leader is in charge of creating community. We're all leaders in our own, we're leading by role, whatever role we're in at every point in time, the different masks that we wear at any stage during the day. So talk to us a little bit about community and why that's important. And each of us has that responsibility to create community where people belong. And then how do we know when the community maybe is off a little bit and when there's not a sense of belonging?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just as important as for to think about like when things are moving in the right direction or we're really being intentional about creating community. To also think about those times when maybe it's not, and that can be uncomfortable, especially depending on the hierarchy of where you are. You may not be the one who's leading the meeting and recognizing that maybe there's a few people who maybe don't feel like they belong or aren't feeling like they're seen or valued. Within that space. So I think, again, there are things that we can do as individuals, even if we're not the one who is in charge. It is a little bit easier if you happen to be leading a meeting and maybe someone is being, talked over or being interrupted or they're just kind of don't seem as engaged in the process and in the conversation. It's easy as a leader to say, I've heard from X and Y, but I haven't heard from you yet. Is there anything you want to contribute to the conversation before we make a decision? So that way you can make sure that everyone has a voice and feels heard in that space. If maybe you're not leading, it could be that it's your turn to talk or you're saying something and you could sort of pass it along to someone else and sort of say, gosh, I know you have this expertise in this and we've talked about this before. I'd love to hear your perspective on this and sort of share that as well. So I think there's ways to do that. Which can sometimes be uncomfortable, but that's one example of sort of creating that space and sort of recognizing that maybe it's not there. And then some of it is just sort of, again, going back to if you're noticing maybe someone is not engaged, maybe pulling them aside and asking questions about, you seem to be not quite yourself today, or I noticed that you're not sharing your perspectives as I've seen you done in the past. Is there something going on? Is there something I can help with? Just again, being curious about that. It may just be that they had a bad day. They're thinking about something completely not related to work. Maybe their kid is sick at home. Maybe they have an ailing parent that they're worried about, and so they're preoccupied with something else. But you don't want to make assumptions on how someone is showing up to work without actually kind of just asking, because sometimes we think about, maybe someone's not speaking up, then you think, oh gosh, like they disagreed with the plan. They're just not engaged in the work anymore. They're not contributing, but you really want to get to that. So I think a lot of that goes to just sort of sharing your observation, and it could be, again, not judgmentally sort of saying it, but really just sort of what your observations are of that individual in that interaction and just sort of ask questions.
And I like how you talked about challenging assumptions because it's so easy for us to say, oh, there's Rakhee. She's looking out the window. She hasn't said a word. She has a kind of a furrowed eyebrow. She's pushed back. She's looking at her phone. Gosh, I can't believe she's so disengaged. She knows how important this is. And all of a sudden now I go down and I'm creating a story. I wonder if she's mad at me because that time and when this and that and the other. Or there goes Kim again, talking, talking, talking. She always thinks like she knows the answers and she's not going to give any space for this. And why should I bother try to put in an idea when it's going to be, railroaded over anyway? So all these conversations we always seem to have in our heads and our hearts, and underlying this is a bunch of assumptions. So I think As an extrovert, for example, I always have to challenge my assumptions of why someone is thinking, saying, doing, not thinking, not saying, not doing, that it may not be what I think it is. We don't can never truly know someone. We can get some insight into who they are, but that's why I think it's so important, like you said, to challenge my assumptions and then maybe privately, you wouldn't want to embarrass someone and say, hey, Rakhee, I haven't heard from you. Are you going to contribute here? I wouldn't want to embarrass you because some people may have some, again, a lot going on, or they may have some anxiety, or that's not cool to call them out like that. But then being aware of knowing that maybe Dr. Bhayani wants to stew on this, so I'm going to send her that thing a week in advance to think about, or 2 weeks in advance. Or maybe if I know my colleague is sitting next to me and he's going through a tough time right now, and I have a heightened awareness about that, I might say, hey, I'm wondering if it's okay if we table this decision for 24 hours, 48 hours. Can we all is there something we haven't thought about? And I'm wondering if, we're missing somebody who's not here today. Can we just give this a beat and let it cool off a bit and let it percolate? That might be an invitation to bring an alternative perspective to a meeting or situation, even if we're not the leader. I think you're describing a community or an ecosystem or culture where that's safe to say, hey, let's not do groupthink here. Or if someone doesn't feel empowered or is having an off day, that, hey, I got you. I'm going to speak up for you, or I'm going to, kind of push back a little bit, or say, wait a second. So that's what I like about what you're saying, is kind of goes back to the assumptions.
Yeah, and I think it's important. It's all of this work, it's all individuals within the workspace have that sort of ability to affect everybody else's experience on a day-to-day basis, right? So it's not one of those things that, yes, trying to change the culture and climate of a institution seems very difficult, right? It's not something that one person is going to be able to do. And so I think the call for action is really for each of us to think about, how are we showing up to work, and how are we showing up to work for our colleagues and for everybody on our teams. Because in reality, we're all working with teams, regardless of what area in the academic institution you're working in. We don't work in silos by ourselves. We really are working in groups that are oftentimes multidisciplinary, right? And so you're working with individuals who come from different backgrounds, different expertise, and you're really trying to find ways, how do we create these bridges between our individuals, between individuals and between different teams, because teams are coming together as well. And so I think, to think about it in a more simplistic way is, what can I do when I show up to work? And
Mm.
how can I, and obviously you're not going to necessarily have time to like have deep conversations with everybody every day, but you kind of, as you slowly bring in maybe one question, like, how was your weekend? Tell me a little bit more about this, or, just so that you show that you care about the individual, and it's not and make sure it's not a superficial, like, oh, how was your weekend? And then you walk by like in 2 seconds, but really take the time and really learn about the individual. I think that really makes a difference.
Especially when these uncertain times, we're in a funding climate now that's very uncertain, and many of our academic health systems, we're always kind of pinched in these very narrow margins of generating revenue and budgets, and short-staffed and tight resources. A lot of, I think, that recognition of, I see you, I know this is tough, this is not an easy it's not an easy space to be in. So that kind of little bit of a grace and mercy of, yeah, this can be a grind. This can be scary. This is for a lot of our colleagues who are doing, research and building research careers, and their portfolios now all of a sudden look like they're in jeopardy. That's just one layer. And you mentioned earlier, we're all multi-layered. There's so many complexities in one human being. Then you look at that in a section, a division, a department, a school, an institution, a health system with all the patients. Oh my goodness, the layers, the layers, the layers. So belonging is something that just so critical, fundamental, and yet easy that we can all do something just small to say, I see you. Like you said, it's not a necessarily huge conversation, but just to kind of look at somebody and pause a beat and look in their eyes. Yeah, we don't have time to talk right now. We're running really fast, but I see you and you're important. I'm glad you showed up today, and I'm glad you give a darn, and I'm glad that we're all working on this together. And so I think it's really important, this conversation. Dr. Bhayani, what happens though when some people feel like they don't belong anymore, and maybe, they don't for various reasons. They've outgrown an institution or they've outgrown their position, severing ties, and it's a negative, but it can be a positive or both. Sometimes, you really, this isn't a good fit. We've tried, it's not working out. You're not happy. This isn't working for us. Or, oh my gosh, what a great news. You have this opportunity to go and you were here and you spent time here and we're a part of your success. So how did that whole thing with the belonging work when it comes to severing relationships?
Yeah, so I think there are two different sort of aspects to a similar sort of moving on, right? So one is if you, as we sort of alluded to earlier, if you were invited to a space and, initially it was billed as, yes, we value your, different perspectives and your expertise and the experience you're bringing in, but the infrastructure really just wasn't there. And no matter what you did in terms of trying to make inroads, you just felt like you didn't belong. And that could be you just didn't get the support you needed to succeed in the role that you were in. When you tried to share those differing perspectives and bring in those other experiences, you were shot down at every turn without really feeling like you were that you were being valued, right? It's different when someone says, wow, this is a really great perspective you bring in, but this isn't the right time for it. We don't have the funding for it, but you really do feel like it's not lip service, right? They really do care about about your perspective. So if you really don't feel like that, where you're at the table, but when you don't really feel comfortable speaking up, what are you going to do? You are going to disengage, right? Because eventually you're going to stop hitting your head against a wall and you're going to say, okay, I'm going to disengage. You're not going to be happy there. And you're going to start looking for other opportunities. And yes, I mean, obviously we all really, we're go-getters. We want to try to make it work, but sometimes you just can't put a square peg in a round hole, right? So you just can't. And at those times, I think leaving, looking for a different opportunity is best for your mental health, best for your career advancement, and just best for your sort of overall well-being. And I think that's a different situation. And oftentimes in those situations, both parties sort of recognize that and that it's not going to work. And then it sort of is that there's a natural departure there. The other part, which I think is the more exciting part and the more optimistic, positive part, is that when you do feel like you belong in an institution, in a program, in a team, where you feel like, gosh, I've made a lot of great contributions here. I've grown a lot. I've gotten great support, mentorship, sponsorship. Just feel like I have really been nurtured and I have grown, and maybe there isn't like the next step for you at that institution, and perhaps you're looking just to kind of grow because you've reached your maximum potential where you are, but now you're ready to take the next step. And so sometimes you can find that within your institution. And sometimes you have to look out elsewhere. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think sometimes that's a necessary part of the career advancement and sort of the natural progression of people's careers. And so if you really are in a supportive environment, if you tell, your leadership, that, gosh, like I have felt great here. And now I, am looking to move on and I found this great opportunity. I think if you're really in a place that values community, values, that mentorship aspect of growing somebody, having someone grow and reach their potential, they're going to be so excited to sort of launch you into the next stage that I don't think there's a risk of sort of burning bridges. I think it's more of, wow, this is great. Like you are advancing in your career, and how awesome is it going to be for you as an individual and for us, right? Because it's a reflection of how supportive we are and how much we value our faculty and our employees here, that we are really fostering that growth to take them to the next level. So I think that's actually a really positive thing.
And Rakhee, what would you say to somebody who does take a next step and they're a learner, they're starting their career and they're going to go to a new institution, or their early career faculty, mid-career, their staff, their leadership? What would you suggest they do or be aware of to belong or to nurture that belonging in a new culture, in a new place?
Yeah, so that can be challenging, right? Especially depending on how long you've been at your prior institution, and you kind of know the people. You sort of know, if you need something, who to go to. You kind of have an idea of kind of the way things run, in some sense, right? And you kind of know the dynamics of that team, of that program, of that department. Going to a new place, I think part of it again goes back to the listening, right? I think for me as an individual, I'm more of on the introverted side than extroverted side. So for me, what I would probably do is sort of listen. And it's not so much not speaking up because I don't feel like I don't belong or feel like I'm trying to fit in, but really trying to listen to sort of see where are the opportunities, where are the individuals who I can sort of go to for that support, to learn about sort of the unwritten rules of an institution, because every place has them, right? There's certain people that can get things done, right? There's certain people that kind of are quietly doing the work behind the scenes. There are people that are, the cheerleaders who are sort of like cheering you on in the background. So there's a lot of different individuals you need, right, on your own team, sort of your board of directors that you're going to need to succeed in your workspace. So I think, meet people, listen, ask questions, and I think that goes a long way.
I love it. And my being here 6 months as an extrovert, I did all of that and joined everything. I'm one of those people who they say, "Hey, Kim, do you want to?" In the midstream, I'd say yes. So right away, I got my church family, I got my gym family, I joined the rescuing the sea turtles, I got the the Grand Opera House season pass, the East End Theater Company season pass, cleaning up the beaches. I mean, anything that was out there, volunteering at the nursing home, taking my dog to go to the nursing home, visiting everything. I just kind of jumped in full force. And so that was also something that I found that if I'm in it 100%. And I just want to experience the new place, go to the things. So meet people and learn, as you're saying. Like I'm curious, who does what, who cares about what, who likes this, who who are the people or the situations where maybe not quite my fit, but I'm curious about that. So I think that is the challenge of finding who we are, in this world and in this space, and then navigating the path to success and meeting other people on the road, and you're just holding hands, walking along for a while, and then maybe your paths diverge, but looking for fellow travelers and seeing how we could all work together and belong in certain places for certain periods of time. I think it's fun, it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. And, even when you go to a new place, I mean, you are, if you're a champion of sort of this community, this idea of like community building, creating spaces of belonging, you're going to bring that energy to that space as well. And it may not even be something that they've considered or put a word to it, but maybe they already have that sort of the sense of community and support, or maybe they don't, but they're willing to learn about that as well. So again, it's a lot of it is there. Sometimes it can feel like with these, when you're in these big spaces, that, gosh, don't have any kind of like my effect on large institution is so small, I'm not going to, it's like a little pebble in the ocean type of thing. But really thinking about it more as, every experience, every time you interact with somebody, there is something, some energy that gets imparted, some sort of feeling that you leave with that person. Because we all know when we've had interactions with individuals who you can tell they were not listening to you, right? They
Mhm.
just sort of, it was a, and there's no judgment on them either, because again, they could be literally thinking about a sick patient, something, a big project they have coming up, or a family member that's having issues. Um, then we can also think back to times where it could be a very short conversation with somebody, but you can tell that they really cared about your answers. Like they were in it, even if it was just for 2 minutes, they
Mhm.
really cared about listening to you and they
Yeah.
heard you. And so some of it is not about the length of time you spend with somebody. So it's really more quality of time. So quality over quantity. And so I think sometimes if you just think, sort of reframe it that way, you can make really impactful little micro connections throughout the day. So it's not just, you don't have to say, be thinking like, oh my gosh, I have to have 20-minute conversations with people, because no one
Yeah.
has time to do that all day, right? I mean,
Right.
so again, it's those small things. And I think the small things really do add up in the end. And I think those were the things that we tend to remember, like the small things that people have done, just the feeling that you get after you've been in those interactions
Mm.
with people.
Ooh, Dr. Bhayani, I love that micro connections. I love that. It's just a little bit of a mind switch of go, and I can be crunchy pants. I can choose to be angry or sad or all those emotions. And I can also choose in this micro encounter to smile, to open a door for somebody, to pick up that piece of trash, just some little itty bitty things that, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I feel better. Why? Because I have a smile on my face. It may have been pushed or manufactured, but isn't that interesting? Now I do feel a little happier. And that person just smiled back at me. Oh, that's right. I do have an impact, and how I come into a situation changes the energy. So I really like how you painted the idea of these micro encounters with patients, with learners, with staff, with administrators, with gas station attendants, you name it. Those little brief moments can, on a dime, make you, feel like you've just been physically, punched, and you're like, oh, that was kind of aggressive. Or it can also, what a beautiful smile and what a great greeting from the security guard. This is wonderful. So I love this topic on belonging, and I'm so appreciative for you being here, Dr. Bhayani. I'm going to leave the final word and wrap up to you. What would you like to say in closing to the Faculty Factory Podcast international community?
I think the main thing I would say is to just think about being intentional about how you show up at work, how you show up with others, creating those connections, because it really does have a big impact on not only you, but the space and the environment that you're in. And I think, when we think about it, going back to what I said in the beginning, is don't we all want to be in spaces where we feel like we are valued and known and heard and seen for who we are?
Love it. Great. Dr. Rakhee Bhayani. Thanks. Come back next time to the Faculty Factory Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Faculty Factory Podcast. We are a faculty development community sharing tools to build academic leaders in healthcare. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast? Please visit facultyfactory.org/contact and send me a message there. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Office of Faculty Affairs at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas.